issue is that in your system you have a temporary, spurious, demonically inspired faith. And so you have no proof that your faith that you currently express is of God. That's the whole issue.
Right. So the issue, Church and Fan and Chapel, when we talk about you lacking assurance, we're not saying that if any, I'm not going to bore you. I can give you logical ways that I can be wrong about the gospel and I can tell you that it doesn't undermine my assurance. If you want to press about that, I can give you examples. The problem is not you might be wrong. That's not the claim. The problem is it's entailed within the theology of final perseverance of the saints. The entailment is that there are some people who thought they were saved. Matthew 7, Lord, Lord, didn't we do all these things? They're wrong. They were convinced by their own. They looked at Jesus. They had all the works. They turned out they were damned. Now, Free Grace has a way to explain that. You guys' explanation is, well, they were just deceived. So you don't know you're not in that category. So it's not an absolute claim. It's relative to it's an internal critique. I'm assuming you understand what internal critique is, Territon. So, I'm making an internal critique of your position.
It seems to me like that the answer, when I ask you, how is it that we don't know? The answer is, well, you could be wrong. And if you could be wrong, then you don't know, which it's not very satisfactory to me in terms of the fact that we know that it's a fact that people can be self-deceived. It's established from Scripture that people can be self-deceived. So based on that, how doesn't this just result in you can't know anything?
It's not the issue about you can't know anything. The issue is your view of faith true or is it false? That's the issue. If your view of faith is true, then because it's true, then certain things logically follow, which includes the idea that your faith may actually be demonic. So if we assume the Calvinistic system of faith, that follows. And if Dan's borrowing from that in some type of sense, then it's going to follow into his system too. And he made some statements that made me wonder earlier.
Yeah, and again, I can illustrate that more, but you guys can move on if you're happy. It's an internal critique of your system. That's what we're focusing on. And you guys are just kind of hand waving it away.
So do you agree that some people are self-deceived thinking they're saved when they're not?
Yes.
Okay. That's enough.
So
here's the issue with that. It's not because of the type of faith definition of faith, because we can adopt your definition of faith, except the irresistible grace, regeneration preceding faith. Then you'll be sovereign grace. But other than that, we can adopt your definition, Church and Fan, and it works right with our system.
Right. So the question you should follow up is, well, why can you be deceived given what your claim is, and how do you have assurance? That's the question you ought to ask. Now, whether you do or not, that's another question, but that's the question you ought to ask. And if you don't ask it, dear to audience Q&A, one of y'all ought to ask it.
So if it's an internal critique that also applies to your system, just with different rationale, then how is it a valid critique at all?
Because the internal critique that I'm making of you does not apply to our system.
But if we don't
grant demonic faith.
But the result that you can't know is the same, correct?
No, because the passage is referring to believers. And so I know that the scriptures were given to believers. And if I believe the gospel, I'm eternally secure.
But Dan just asked, and I thought you answered it affirmatively, that you do believe that some people think they're saved and they're not saved.
Correct. I do.
Why? Because they don't believe in the right object, the right promise. Exactly.
That's the issue.
It's not the issue of faith.
But y'all are appealing in the internal critique is you have a type of faith problem. You have a true faith, false faith. We don't have that distinction. If I'm wrong, the reason I'm wrong is because my whole religion is false. And that's an issue of faith. Okay. But everyone in this room and in the audience, I'm assuming, believes that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. So that's not the issue. So that's why the internal critique is with you. We don't have false faith. We have only one kind of faith, and the object of the faith is the question. But the problem is y'all can have the right object of faith and not actually know if you have a true faith in the same object. That's the critique that y'all are not landing.